Hi, and welcome to this brief description of the different kinds or types of medical literature that you'll encounter in the research process. There's different levels of evidence that we may have talked about in the population-based medicine course, or you may have heard other faculty talk about that, but there's different types of articles, different types of literature that fit into the different levels of evidence in the evidence-based medicine pyramid, which you may have seen before. So this probably looks familiar. If not, this is just pretty much standard description and a graphical representation of the different levels of evidence, different kinds of articles that you'll encounter when you're doing research with lab studies, case series, case control studies, cohort studies, and RCTs making up the bottom portion of the pyramid. It's not to say that they're bad, it's just that they're used for different things than necessarily the top level would be where systematic reviews and meta-analyses are. The main difference between a systematic review and a meta-analysis is that often a meta-analysis is much more rigorous in its evaluation of quantitative data, whereas systematic reviews may approach more a qualitative data aspect. And we'll talk a little bit about how to identify the differences between a meta-analysis and a systematic review. But again, even though the meta-analysis and systematic review are at the top of that EBM levels of evidence pyramid, these other types of papers can be useful for just doing things like a narrative review, or if you're in a situation where you're maybe a third or fourth year with your preceptor, or even after you're a resident with your attending and they say, I want, go home and do a literature review of this given topic, a narrative review probably would be good. They're not necessarily going to want to see your methodology, your controlled vocabulary, your research strategy that are developed in something like a systematic review or a meta-analysis. So these other types of papers have a place too. So I want to talk a little bit about how to find different types of literature and resources. The main example I'm showing is from PubMed, because everyone knows PubMed. We have other resources that have various facets available in their advanced search strategy, but I just figured I'd show PubMed because everyone uses PubMed, and you'll continue to use PubMed after you graduate. And you might not see, when you first pull up the PubMed site, you'll find on the left there are facets including article type. And you'll see on the box to the left of this slide, I have mine set to books and documents, clinical trials, meta-analysis, RCTs, reviews, and systematic reviews. Yours might look different than that because you can actually customize what you find here. And so if you expand the categories, or you can actually expand on the PubMed site to change article type categories that are available: species, language, sex, journal, and age. So if we're just focusing on that article type, you'll see that I can also include case reports or clinical studies or different phases of clinical trials, comparative studies. So I can find all these different kinds of publications or articles directly using that facet in PubMed. So I want to talk a little bit about some examples of different kinds of articles that you'll see. And these are found in different, not one resource is not, different types of articles aren't limited to one resource or the other. You'll find them in various resources. These just happen to be the places where I found these. And I actually searched these citations in PubMed, and then PubMed links to our holdings here at LUCOM, so we're able to see which resources have it. But anyways, so a case report is an example of just the facts, hypertension in the emergency department. So this is kind of a lower level, like we saw, a lower level of evidence on that evidence-based pyramid. I'm going to see if I can pull this up here. So I don't think I need to see the PDF to see here we go, full text. So this is just, you'll kind of can tell from looking at this is pretty brief. It's only 4 pages long. It's got our clinical scenario that's being addressed, key clinical questions that arise from the clinical scenario, key points, and a few references. This is this one instance, this clinical case that happened. This is how we dealt with it. Very low level of evidence, but could be useful depending on what you need it for. If you just need a quick familiarization with something that happens in a given situation in an emergency room, this could be useful. But again, this is the type of article that you're going to see on the lower level of the evidence-based medicine pyramid. We talk in that pyramid about case control studies. And again, I kind of stuck with the hypertension theme because it's I don't know why. But so we found an article in PubMed on hypertension analysis of stress reduction using mindfulness meditation and yoga. And this I found we had access to in our Oxford Medical Journals, which you have access to as part of your Liberty access. And if I pull that up, we can see an example of a case control study. And I may need to pull this. So it's got the abstract and the method. So it has the abstract here. But again, just at first glance, we're not talking about this one instance and the key questions we dealt with. We're talking about methods, methodology. This is getting more sophisticated in its approach to the research question. And again, here's our abstract with backgrounds, methods, and results. But you'll see is a pretty good description of our methods, who the participants are, how the study was designed, what the intervention was. We have a graphical chart showing us how the study was done. There's even statistical methods, and we'll talk more about this, but the more you see like really sophisticated statistical analysis of quantitative data, you're starting to talk about meta-analysis. This is not a meta-analysis, but you can see how it's more sophisticated than what we saw before. So we talked about RCTs, still at the bottom portion of that evidence-based medicine pyramid, but getting to a little higher level. This one I just happened to find was available on PubMed Central, which is an open resource that you have access to. And this one is on causal association between periodontitis and hypertension. So brush your teeth or you get high blood pressure, I guess. But so again, here's the abstract, the methods and results and conclusion, but the full text is available, and over here is a PDF. And we can see again, this is getting a little more sophisticated than even the last case control study that we saw. We have our methods and results. It's full paper. We've got our methods described. Mendelian randomization was used. It's a randomized clinical trial. We have more quantitative data here that we didn't see, especially that first example that we found in the ER. There's a statistical analysis done of the data in this paper. So again, we're not necessarily quite to a meta-analysis level, but this is a much more sophisticated collection of quantitative data than we saw in the previous examples of papers, but we still have a graphical representation of the sample and some more bar graphs showing the data. Now, this is just actually, we'll talk about this, but you start seeing forest plots, that's a pretty strong indication that it could be considered a meta-analysis, but technically, I don't think this is considered one. Now we're to the top two that we talked about, systematic reviews and meta-analyses. And again, there's the basic difference is that systematic reviews deal with more qualitative data types of issues, whereas when you start doing a lot of quantitative data and very sophisticated statistical analysis of that data, you're talking about a meta-analysis, pulling data, quantitative data from multiple studies and synthesizing an answer to a clinical question is what a meta-analysis does. And these I found in PubMed Central and Cochrane Library. If you start getting into systematic reviews, Cochrane Library is like the gold standard for systematic reviews. We have access to it here through LUCOM. You also may hear mention of Joanna Briggs Institute if you're doing systematic reviews, but that resource generally deals more with qualitative reviews than quantitative reviews, whereas Cochrane is more about the data. This is an example of a systematic review called Acupuncture for Hypertension. And again, this is in PubMed Central, and also here's that Cochrane Library, you'll see. I'm just going to pull up the PDF so we can see an example. This is an obvious, very detailed paper written here. I mean, we're talking about 69 pages in this article. And this is again the kind of thing that's going to have search methods described, objectives. You're going to have a description of your data collection and analysis. You're going to have a controlled vocabulary. You're going to have a protocol in place that someone can come behind the authors of this paper, follow the same steps, and get basically the same results. I mean, there may be some new results if you do it after a while after this was published. But that's an example of systematic review. And again, Cochrane Library and Joanna Briggs Institute are two of the big players when you're looking at systematic reviews. They also develop protocols that you can use if you're going to write a systematic review. You can follow protocols that are developed by the Cochrane Collaboration or by JBI. And lastly, hypertension and frailty, a systematic review and meta-analysis. This is in PubMed Central and also the British Medical Journal. And it can be misleading because it says systematic review and meta-analysis. And when we look at it, I'm going to show you exactly one of the dead giveaways, but you won't always see a paper call itself a meta-analysis, even if it is. So sometimes you really have to look for how they're dealing with the data that's collected. Again, our methodology is here, talks about our statistical analysis. It even goes over risk of bias addressed. We have graphical representation of the sample, how it was selected, inclusion and exclusion criteria. And here's what I wanted to show you. That when you see a forest plot of this type of statistical analysis of the data, that's a dead giveaway. That's a meta-analysis. It's the highest level of evidence we can have in the literature. So don't always depend on the title of a review article calling itself a meta-analysis, but really look for how they've treated the quantitative data in the paper. So those are the main different types of articles that you'll find and how they relate to that evidence-based medicine pyramid. There's another resource that I've found recently that talks about different kinds of review articles, and this is something it's kind of new to me, learning about. But there's been some effort in this open access textbook that I found that's hosted by the NIH on different types of review articles, and they'd be used for different purposes. So, for example, a narrative review, again, you have a preceptor or you have an attending that says, I need you to go home and read up on this topic and be prepared to talk about it tomorrow. That's what you're doing, narrative review. You don't need methodology. You don't need controlled vocabulary. I mean, it's helpful to have controlled vocabulary for your searching, but you don't have to write up this process that he can come behind you and do the same thing. That's what you're going to use a narrative review for. It's qualitative summary of what's been written, not really no criteria, a very comprehensive background. Then there's descriptive or mapping reviews, and these are looking for trends, patterns, and theories and findings. It's more systematic and transparent, so there's a little bit more opportunity to come behind and do the same thing. It's often more quantitative in the data, and it's looking for evolution of trends. I mean, you may find systematic reviews that have gradually been done on a given topic, and over time the interventions have changed, or they found one intervention that worked better than another intervention that was examined in a previous systematic review. So that's what those descriptive or mapping reviews are, and specifically reviews looking for that evolution in the results or the methodologies are called mapping reviews specifically. Scoping reviews are kind of cool, and it's kind of a nice preliminary tool to identify gaps in the literature. You may be looking for something and say, man, I'm finding lots of case control studies, I'm finding lots of clinical trials, but I'm not seeing any systematic reviews. And that scoping review will help you find gaps in an emergent topic. So this is it helps you find the potential size of the extant literature, what's out there. And it basically can help you determine whether or not it's worthwhile doing a systematic review, because if you're researching a topic there's already been like 30 systematic reviews, there's not a lot of space to elbow in there, but it can help you identify gaps in the literature. And what's cool is this includes gray literature. So gray literature is research or articles that have not, they may be in the middle of the peer review process. There's a couple different resources like researchgate.net that have that gray literature that hasn't gone through the full publication process yet, but is still out there, and scoping reviews include that literature. Again, we already talked about systematic reviews and meta-analysis. These are aggregative. So again, they have clearly formulated search and protocols. You're either using those Cochrane collaboration protocols or the JBI protocols. They're repeatable. If you do a systematic review properly, someone can come behind you, follow your search strategy, follow your methodology, follow your controlled vocabulary, and find the same results. They're following that PICO process. So problem or patient, intervention, comparison, and outcome. That's how they're answering a clinical question. And again, when statistical methods are used of data analysis, that's when we're talking about meta-analysis, and that's when you want to keep your eye out for like those forest plots or a dead giveaway. Realist reviews are kind of a way to deal or add value to existing systematic reviews. So you may find a lot of systematic reviews on a given topic, but not necessarily in every different context. And these kind of help you take the results of systematic reviews and see how they might apply in those different clinical contexts. They help inform decision policy making. A lot of times this is how guidelines are developed. And lastly, critical reviews are just what they sound like. They're critical evaluation of existing literature. They're looking for contradictions, inconsistencies, strengths, weaknesses in what's out there. So this is not necessarily original research. It's looking at what systematic reviews or meta-analyses have been done, but it seems like maybe, say you find a couple different systematic reviews or meta-analysis about a given topic, and one says completely the opposite thing of the other systematic review. So you're looking for those inconsistencies and looking for those contradictions and to address them with the critical evaluation. And again, the resource I found these different types of review articles in is called the Handbook of eHealth Evaluation and Evidence-Based Approach, and these descriptions are from Chapter 9. And that's a freely available open access textbook that's put up by the NIH. I've put a link to it down there, so it's freely available. I may put a link to this on our research guide, so it might be easier to access. But that's about it for today. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and hopefully this will kind of inspire you to get into the research process, maybe partner with other students or some faculty to see what projects you can get involved in. And I wish you all the best. Thank you.